Joining me is Greg Page, CEO and founder of Heart of the Nation Australia, an original lead singer and a founding member of the Wiggles, an impressive title. How are you, Greg?
Very well, thanks, Janie.
Thank you so much for joining us. Now, it is a landmark report and certainly much needed, but before we do talk about the report, you have a personal experience that really inspired you to help others. Do you mind sharing that story with us?
No, not at all. It is the driving factor behind my involvement in this space. Last year, when I was performing on stage with the Wiggles as a fundraiser for the Red Cross and Wires after the bushfires, I actually suffered a sudden cardiac arrest at the end of the show. I collapsed and my heart stopped beating and I needed to be resuscitated by bystanders. And fortunately for me, there were people around me that knew CPR and there was an AED or defibrillator available at the venue we were performing at. So for me, two of the very important links in the chain of survival were present. So I survived. Now, what I found out waking up in hospital after that event is that I was only one of around 10%, maybe 12% of people that survive a sudden cardiac arrest. And when I heard that, I thought that's just not good enough. Surely in the 21st century in Australia, we as a nation can do better with survival from sudden cardiac arrest. So it launched me on a journey of research and learning about this matter. And I do believe that we can do a lot better in terms of increasing survival rate from sudden cardiac arrest. And those devices, those AEDs, do play a major role in terms of trying to lift survival rates.
Yeah, they certainly do. And the report that was written by Dr. Anthony Ockwell of Economic Connections for the Heart of the Nation. Tell us what's in that report.
Well, look, it's a landmark report because what this does, frustratingly, to get some attention on this matter, particularly from politicians, we've had to look at what the economic cost of sudden cardiac arrest is. Now, there's a massive emotional cost and trauma caused when somebody's life is taken from sudden cardiac arrest, because that term sudden cardiac arrest is so appropriate. It happens suddenly and without warning. It's not like a lot of other life-threatening illnesses or terminal conditions where you might have some time to come to terms with what's going on. Sudden cardiac arrest happens so often around Australia. It affects nearly 26,000 Australians every year. And as I said earlier, it's a survival rate of only around 10 to 12%, which means that for those families of those loved ones who have a sudden cardiac arrest and don't survive, it's a massive shock to their system. So there's that emotional cost. But unfortunately, to get funding into this space, in this area of the chain of survival and resuscitation, in terms of making sure that the community have the skills and the tools to successfully try and resuscitate somebody, there's a cost attached to that. But tragically, the economic cost of sudden cardiac arrest to the country every single year is around $52 billion. Now, that blew me away. When Dr. Ockwell put this report together, he analysed so many things. Now, his background is as a financial analyst, working for government, working for the OECD, and he's done many, many reports on the cost of major trauma to do with roads. Now, road trauma in Australia costs us as a nation around $21 billion every year. The federal government spends a lot of money in that space trying to save lives and trying to improve road situations to decrease deaths and road trauma. However, one thing that we can't really identify is what the government's spending in this space in terms of what you're seeing behind me, call, push, shock. Those three words are so important to increasing survival. What I'd love to see is the federal government and state governments spending wisely in this area too, to try and reduce that economic cost that's being felt by society every year.
It's just extraordinary, isn't it? And it's just so under-acknowledged, as you've been mentioning. And in terms of the defibrillators, I mean, how much are they? I mean, again, with your situation, it was just unbelievable. And you know, you look at these devices and think that there've got to be more out there. And as you said, with Dr. Ockwell doing the report, we just need this done so urgently.
Yeah, look, it really is. They're incredible devices because they are so simple to use. The people that saved my life with an AED that night had never used one before, but they are basically self-working. All you need to do is make sure that it is turned on. So find the power button and turn it on. Some of the devices actually turn on automatically when you open the lid of them, and listen to the voice prompts. they're basically self-working. So as long as you can follow the instructions, you have a very, very good chance of being able to save somebody's life. Now, the biggest issue, well, there's a lot of issues. One of the biggest issues is the fact that 80% of sudden cardiac arrests happen in the home. So where the majority of these sudden cardiac arrests are happening is not at work, it's not at venues like I was playing at, it's not at sporting fields, it's not where there is a greater proliferation of AEDs available. It's actually in residential areas where the community are living and where there isn't great access to an AED. So if we can find a way to get more AEDs into the community, I believe that we'll save a lot more lives and we'll reduce that economic cost to the country that we're feeling every single year. You know, it's loved one. It's, as I said earlier, it's that emotional cost as well. And I think about the day that I left home to do that performance with the Wiggles. I said goodbye to my family, believing that I'd be coming home that night, and I very nearly didn't. Now, for 90% of people that have a sudden cardiac arrest, that's pretty much the way it plays out. And that's a tragedy that I believe that we can go a long way toward fixing if we can get more AEDs into the community where they're needed.
Yeah, very well said. And we're just seeing on screen you performing with the Wiggles. I mean, you're so fit and you're talking about the symptoms. So it can happen so suddenly to anyone, any age, any fitness. And yeah, talk us through again what happened in terms of, like, were there any signs or symptoms when you did have the sudden cardiac arrest?
No, look, for me, I'd just done a big show with the Wiggles. It's a very physically demanding show, and I was quite out of breath at the end of the show, so that's not unusual. So when I went to the side of the stage, I actually can remember collapsing and rolling onto my back and feeling extremely exhausted. Of course, I didn't know at the time that I was going into sudden cardiac arrest, so I was taking very deep, heavy breaths, trying to get oxygen in, but that was probably because my heart was going into cardiac arrest. So one thing it's important to acknowledge too is that there's a difference between a heart attack and a cardiac arrest. So a lot of people get the two terms confused and they're used interchangeably, incorrectly sometimes. In my case, I did have a heart attack. A heart attack is a blockage of the plumbing, so it's a plumbing issue. A cardiac arrest is an electrical issue. I had a massive heart attack, so a bit of plaque in my artery had broken off or had become clotted, which blocked that artery 100%, but it sent my heart straight into cardiac arrest, so hence the term sudden cardiac arrest. People can go on for days, maybe even a week, sometimes experiencing the symptoms of a heart attack. They'll feel the pain in the chest. They're able to talk, they're able to communicate, they're able to breathe. But with sudden cardiac arrest, somebody will collapse because their heart stops pumping blood. It's an electrical problem. Because it's an electrical problem, generally the only thing that's going to fix that, while CPR will keep the blood flowing around the body and keep the brain perfused, the only thing that will fix the electrical problem in the heart, in most cases, is the AED or the defibrillator, because the heart needs to be defibrillated. So the sooner we get that AED onto that patient within the first 3 to 5 minutes, their chance of survival could actually be up around 60% instead of 10% survival if there's no AED available. One other interesting stat, I'm sorry, I'm on a bit of a ramble here because there's so many things going through my head that seem important, but only 2% of people that experience a sudden cardiac arrest in Australia are fortunate enough to get defibrillation by a community member with an AED before the arrival of an ambulance. So with ambulances taking around 12 to 18 minutes sometimes to get to someone in cardiac arrest, time is so critical, and that's why the survival rate may be so low, because that time is just protracted.
Oh, Greg, it's just amazing. I mean, unbelievable, the stats, and we have to wrap it up, unfortunately, but thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and these unbelievable stats, as we were mentioning, and hopefully we look forward to hearing more from you and hearing more defibrillators out there. Thank you so much, Greg.
Yeah. Thanks, Janie, and congrats to Dr. Ockwell for his report. It's incredible.
Absolutely.